see. I mean, I've seen too many poorly trained auditors go into meetings with stakeholders, ask their scripted questions, but not ask the second question, not know what an answer is that should concern them and that they should follow up on. And then, you're not really finding the real issue. So if you shouldn't be sending folks that don't have that understanding of the business and really the understanding of risks associated with that conversation. It's not going to go well.
This episode is brought to you by Greenskies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Greenskies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Greenskies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell, and today on the show, we have Dave Malcom. He was the former Senior Director of Global IT Internal Audit and Advanced Analytics at Accenture for about 10 years. Left there and became the Managing Director for Internal Audit, Digital Transformation, and Data Analytics at Northern Trust, and was also the 2023 IIA Auditor of the Year of the Chicago chapter, and then also is retired. So Dave goes into some detail about this, but this is what I thought was super interesting about Dave. In addition to his very impressive analytics and IT background with internal audit, Dave's like 45 years old and retired in October of 2023. So I met Dave, I think it was shortly before or shortly after he retired. We kind of go into that a little bit. But all right, so Dave's been retired for 7-ish months, and there was something that happened that made Dave go, hey, I need to get back in there and get back working with internal auditors. And so that's largely what the conversation is around, as well as, given Dave's experience, how would Dave build out an internal audit department? What resources would he use? What initiatives would he establish? And then what would be, if Dave was a CAE, what expectations would he have of the audit committee and working with him? And then the last thing I'll say is we've done close to 200 of these, and I've never had chills before during an interview. And so it was at the very, very end where Dave left us, and I went, I legit got chills from that. So if nothing else, make sure you tune in to that piece. All right, with that said, here we go. What is in your or your internet browsing history or your Chat GPT history recently?
Yeah, so my Chat GPT history, it actually was just from the weekend when I found out the rules for the upcoming Mike Tyson Jake Paul boxing match. That I forgot if the traditional weight of boxing gloves for professional fights was 8 ounces or 10, and it's 10. And Paul and Tyson are fighting with 16-ounce pillows on their hands. So I wouldn't expect anyone to get knocked out in that fight. And I also wouldn't expect everyone to give 100% in that fight because they're making quite a bit of money. Mm-hmm. And then in my internet browser, I have the Scottsdale Omni Monte Lucia Hotel, which headed to tomorrow, which I think, most retired people head to Arizona.
Right.
And then I've got tabs up for my 3 different email accounts that I use: my Gmail, my burner Yahoo account, and the email for my church address, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about.
Okay. Yeah, somewhat unfortunately, I guess, when I was in public accounting, first job out of school, I had to go to Scottsdale for the first month. That's where the client was. And so I got to experience the retired life fresh out of school. There's been this yearning ever since, how do we get into retirement so we make our way to Scottsdale?
I've always loved it. It's a great place. And still here in Chicago, the weather hasn't completely turned. We'll have a nice day here and there, but it's I'm looking forward to 90 in the sun.
Yeah, I know there's a pipeline of Chicago to Arizona in general. My in-laws are from there. My wife's from the Chicago area, so I always hear about that. I think there's even like a Lou Malnati's or Giordano's or something in Scottsdale.
I was just say they've opened up like a Portillo's, a Lou Malnati's, like all the big Chicago restaurants are open because of
mini Chicago,
yeah,
awesome.
Chicago residents, yeah.
All right. So we did talk about retirement.
Yeah.
Good segue here. Retirement. So for those that don't know, I think you and I met just after you had retired. In 2023, you and I spoke at the Audit Board user conference. We were on a panel, and that's kind of how we got to know each other. And you had mentioned retirement, and I was like, what do you mean, dude? You're not old for sure. But I know in us getting to know each other and hanging out, we've done a few other webinars and things together since then. You've mentioned that you want to come out of retirement. So help us understand what that is or why you want to come out of retirement after being in it for all of, 7 months?
7 months. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, last October, so when we met at that conference, I was burned out. I was, just the fatigue of balancing everything that was going on with COVID and return to office, people not wanting to come to the office, and just stepping back and determining, do I still want to be an auditor? That's still what I want to do. Is it bringing me the joy that my career should bring me? So I stepped back and actually started pouring myself into two of the things that are, really important to me in my life. First is my faith. And second is boxing. I've been a fighter before and wanted to make sure I still had it at age 45. But with the church, I entered a leadership cohort, preaching cohort, all with the goal of becoming a pastor. It all goes right. That will happen in June. So it's been, if you told me that's where I was going to end up 3 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. But it's been an absolutely amazing experience for me. The people that I've gotten to work with and get to know, and the work that I've gotten to do has been extremely rewarding. And it's not something I'm going to stop doing. And the reason, though, why I am now entertaining getting back into the workforce or regular corporate workforce is after we did that conference, I spoke at GAM with one of our colleagues from Activity, who was also on our panel, and also we did the webcast as well. What's going on with emerging technologies today is too much for me to not be involved in. Myself as a creative person who wants to be using the most advanced technology to make things easier for my staff, I feel like this is going to be, in this, I'm talking about generative AI. I think everybody is talking about that now and knows when you're talking about efficiencies and new technology, that's what you're pointing towards. It's the biggest, it's going to be the biggest, it's going to have the biggest impact on how we audit anything since the internet. So while I've been out and speaking with people like yourself and my partners at Activity, the ideas that we've come up with, just how you can use ChatGPT or generative AI, it's amazing. And I don't want to, I feel like I owe it to the audit community to come back and help be a part of this and help ensure departments are using it for the right reasons and using it securely. So I'm just really excited about getting back in and, re-engineering old processes that may really need it. So
I think it was, when it first really hit the scene, it was, I think, scary for a lot of people to go, is this actually going to replace me finally? I know for myself, I looked at Greenskies and what we're doing, and I was going, how is this going to impact us? And there's a level of fear to a degree. And then really once you own it and dive into it, is like, we're about to rock this thing now because we're jumping on it. We're going to implement it. And so it's kind of interesting to go from this like fear. I don't want to say factor. This like fear to this like, oh, this is awesome, and how we're going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, ChatGPT seemed to roll out overnight. No one, it just was out there, and companies obviously didn't know what to do. a lot of them just blocked it, but then you realize there's tons of other these tools out there that people can use if they want to. But then since then, they've obviously made enterprise grade tools and implemented more security controls in these tools so you can be more comfortable using them. Yeah. So I think, right now, if you're forward thinking, high performing audit department, if you don't have a course plotted out by now of how you're going to integrate ChatGPT into your audit work, you're behind.
So what would let's say you're back in the workforce. So you're looking right now, and say you get back, you're in this leadership position, you have the ability to really implement Gen AI, and you can do it. They go, hey, look, Dave, you're the guy. We're terrified that you're going to box us to death. So here's all the resources in the world you could ever need. Build an internal audit department. What would that look like if you got to build your own internal audit department?
Here's the biggest mistake that I see every department make, and that I talk to at every conference, is around how to get started in data analytics. And so if you don't make the right investment in technology and in people that understand analytics, you're going to be you're going to be an archaic department. ChatGPT is going to be great, but data analytics already has that tried and true ability to perform continuous assurance over continuous auditing over your key controls, so you don't have to do those audits. That in and of itself saves so many hours. But you see teams that just like oh, we'll hire one guy to do data analytics, or we've got an ACL license. That's not enough. You need everybody in your department needs to have some level of data literacy, but you need to have 5 to 6 resources that are just coders, maybe a data scientist or two, because that the things that you can do with analytics to allow you to quantify so many things that we weren't able to quantify before is where the audit profession, if you're not there now, you're behind. So, and that's really what it always comes down to, is your budget. We're not allowed to, they're not giving us the budget to buy, a data lake or, Ultrix, anything like that. And that's the mistake. They'll say, well, we could get by just on one ACL license. You can't support depending on the size of your audit department, one person and one ACL license isn't going to get you.
Yeah. We always talk about when we build strategies for internal audit departments with analytics or for analytics is people, process, technology. You have to address all these buckets. And usually what we see is when we talk technology with them, they go, yeah, we have X tool. We're good to go. Okay, what else do you have in place? I'm like, that's really it. We bought the tool. And the latest and greatest tools definitely make it easier and provide for some additional opportunities that other tools don't. But buying a tool is not a strategy.
No. And unfortunately, so many companies think that. And they like you said, and some of the biggest software provider in the world has made it extremely easy to do analytics. And where even someone that has a little bit of data literacy can do a lot of things, but you have to make the investment. And it's just, I don't think audit departments do a good enough job to either the finance department, whoever they report into budget wise, of making the argument of how much more value they're going to add with that expense. What's the savings that's going to be associated with it? What's the risk reduction that's going to be associated?
So you've mentioned data literacy twice now. And I know I've thought about this question before too, in terms of if I built out an audit department from scratch, how would I do it? What would the initiatives be? Data literacy would be towards the very top of those initiatives that we would launch. Everyone has this floor level competency, data literacy. But for those that maybe aren't familiar with that term, what do you mean by data literacy?
One, it's a knowledge of the business. And that's something I do want to talk about too, is do your people really understand the data they're looking at and what it means? So, it's part of understanding the business. And then it's what are you expecting to see in the data? So what are your anomalies? What looks like, this could be something we want to dig into more. Teaching people about, how the data drives the business and how the data can story tell what the business is doing. And when audit sees things pop or sees things spike a certain way, that should bring their attention to something. So, data literacy really is not a lot more than understanding the business, understanding the applications you use, and what the data is that are in those applications and how they use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's formal definitions. Everyone kind of has their own.
I'm sure mine did not just hit the formal definition,
well,
by the way.
Mine's not going to hit it either. That's what I'm getting at. Somebody asked me one time, like, what's the definition of AI? And I was like, you could take 100 AI PhDs and put them all in a room and ask them, and you would get a different answer. Like, but you know what it is. Similar to risk.
Right.
Like, there's that conversation around how do you define risk? Like, you know what it is.
Yes.
But with data literacy, for me, it's if I should be able to send someone an Excel file, we'll say, with nice, decent rows and columns. You should be able to look at that as an auditor and go, I want to know the answer to this question, and this question, and I need to do the analysis in this, we'll just say spreadsheet, to figure out what that answer is, or to get closer to the answer. And that's where I see a lot of people struggle, and they'll go, I mean, we have this data set, what are we supposed to do with it? And that's where I would go, okay, that's where you have a data literacy gap right there that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Well, if for those that are listening, and we maybe have hit on it already, but for those that are listening, if there's one thing that they should do after listening to this episode to make their audit department better, their organization better, whatever it may be, what would be that one thing that you would want to impress upon the audience?
Yeah, I mean, as internal audit, obviously our primary mandate is to protect the brand, right? I mean, we're the last line of defense. And you can't do that appropriately if you don't understand the business and your people don't have the business literacy. I mean, I've seen too many poorly trained auditors go into meetings with stakeholders, ask their scripted questions, but not ask the second question, not know what an answer is that should concern them and that they should follow up on. And then, you're not really finding the real issues that are going on. So if you shouldn't be sending folks that don't have that understanding of the business and really the understanding of the risks associated with that conversation. It's not going to go well. And you're going to see it in the work paper and in the notes from your interview. And also that really, it kind of decredits your audit department's standing in the organization. I mean, my goal has always been to be a trusted advisor to the rest of the organization. I don't like writing audit reports. I don't get paid by the audit report. I don't get paid by the audit issue. I would rather have somebody from the business come to me and say, Dave, I'm implementing this. Do I have the right controls in place? Give me your opinion on that. If your organization isn't getting requests like that, I'd be asking myself, does my staff really understand the business enough? And what kind of relationship do they build with stakeholders?
And like tying this back to analytics, there's a framework called CRISP DM. For those interested, you can look into it. But it's a framework for developing analytics or data mining or machine learning projects. And the very first step, there's 6 overarching kind of steps that you follow. The very first one, and again, this is a framework for developing analytics. The very first thing is understand the business. And so even from that, like very technical analytics perspective, they've learned, the folks that built it, and it's a very popular, I mean, pretty much everybody uses it. They kind of learned over time, if we don't understand the business, then our analytics project or product isn't really going to work like we thought it would. So I 100% agree.
Yeah. I mean, it's, if you go from working at a financial service company to a manufacturing company, the risks are completely different. What you're looking at is completely different. Your conversations are completely different. You need to understand that and be aware of that and, upskill yourself in understanding what that new business is.
Yeah. So let's say you go back into the workforce. You're a CAE now. You're leading an audit department, and you're getting to know the audit committee chair. What questions or expectations would you expect them to have of you as the CAE?
I would want them to just straight be able to flat out ask me, what do you think the top risks are in the organization and how are you covering? So it's very clear that you can say these are our top 5 risks that we believe and why we've come to that belief as an audit department, and this is how we're getting coverage. And hopefully the rest of the business agrees that these are the top risks, that everybody is aligned across the 3 lines that these are our top risks. And the CAE should be able to go into the room, quantifiably defend why these are the top risks, and then, map out how they're getting coverage. So, and then those same questions can be asked at the first line, the second line, to make sure they've got the right procedures in place to ensure we're protecting the brand, which is, again, everybody's goal at the end of the day. But to me, I would want to make the audit committee know that I'm aware of what the top risks are to this organization. And I have the capabilities and the plans in place to make sure that we are looking at them and spending enough time on them to ensure that all the right controls.
Yeah. Well, earlier I want to follow up on something you said earlier, in that something to the effect of audit reports aren't necessarily our end product, or they shouldn't necessarily be our end product. I think there's some folks that would agree. I think there's more that would disagree, though, although I agree with what you're saying. So what's the alternative there? Like, we should be measured against how many audit reports we issue, but maybe what should we be measured against, or what's another way to communicate that?
Yeah, I mean, I just have seen so many departments where the top KPI is how many reports you issued that quarter. And that's what highlights your first page of your deck to audit. High-performing departments are doing so much more than just audit. So I would expect to see a decrease in the number of audit reports if I was an audit committee, unless you're adding more people to do other things. But now when you think about continuous auditing, you're replacing a significant amount of audit hours that would have gone towards those reports and are getting better assurance over the operating effectiveness of those controls. So how are you showing that value to the audit committee? How are you conveying that value? I mentioned too, your stakeholders coming to you proactively and asking for, consultative assessments, pre-implementation assessments. To me, that is the sign, one of the biggest signs of a high-performing audit department, is because it shows the trust that the business has in you, that you're the experts on risk, and I want to go to you before I roll something out. So that's something to me that I really want to highlight, even above the number of reports, is we had 6 people come, reach out to us this quarter and ask us to look at something. And then, you take all that activity, and this is where you and I as data guys come in. And you can quantify through all that activity you've done, have you reduced risk? Are controls operating more effectively? Have you, has the business obtained more cost efficiencies? There's so many things you can do now with data. And now that you have it available to you, you have these tools available to you, you have people with the data literacy, you can do so much better to quantitatively show your activity, the business's performance, than just saying, we issued 10 reports, 5 were red, 2 were yellow, 3 was green. So it's just, when I see some audit reporting decks and the light of them, and where all I think about when I think about like a 30-page audit report deck, you're burying the message. You haven't done it. No audit committee member is going through a 30-page deck with a fine tooth comb.
Yep.
And that's the other thing too about audit reports. When I see a 20-page audit report, not the only person that's reading that 20-page audit report is the person you audit. Yeah. Their boss probably isn't even reading it, let alone the CEO. So, the nature of the audit report has to change. If you want it to be more impactful and you want people to really understand the work you did and the real risks that resulted from that. And there are some organizations that are doing things really creative, but there are some, man, that I still see that as the top metric on their audit committee materials. And to be honest, like, that is just not, and the audit committee may not realize this, but this is not something you should really care as much about as some other area.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and one that we try to help CAEs understand when we help put together their audit committee materials is, okay, for example, your lead slide is number of audits issued or number of audit reports issued or something, and just going, does the audit committee care about that? And they go, I mean, I guess that's what we've always showed them. I go, just go ask them. Hey, you've been in this role long enough now, audit committee. What do you actually care about? Instead of us just coming up here and here's the same thing, every quarter, and this is the number we completed. Like, what do you actually care about? All right, now let's build our deck around that. But I'm curious. So I was talking to the CAE one time, and they wanted to implement analytics initiatives. And I said, yep, that's great and that's wonderful. And I said, what, they're audits that we can cut out of the audit plan to make room for this because, we have to account for the time it's going to take. And I said, I'm sure it's, it'll be fine. Like nobody completes their audit plan every single year because there's always a new thing, a new risk that pops up and you got to go, okay, now we move audit 4 down the list to bump this one up, et cetera. And the CAE went, no, we finish our audits every single year. Like every single year we issue, whatever the audit plan is, we do it. And I just went, all right. But what's your thought on that?
That's bad. I mean, that's actually probably, that's a terrible sign because, one of the other things I wanted to mention was, people move to quarterly risk assessments, but you can almost move to real-time risk assessments now, given to, our ability to move your data. And so, like you said, I would never, ever expect an audit department to do the same plan that they had at the end of the year. That, like, risks change like that. I mean, ChatGPT wasn't on anybody's radar, a month before it came out. And if you didn't adjust your plan, like, within a month of its release, you're not auditing something relevant. And that's why you need to continuously, I think, like, those quantifiable risk models, I think, we've built them at Accenture. They were the most valuable tools we had because it showed us, are we still, at the beginning of, when you put together an audit plan, it's like usually the fourth quarter of the year before. So, you're talking, 5 quarters later, how do you know that there's still the highest risk area? So we continuously monitored those quantitative risk assessments just to say, hey, are these still the right audits, but also understanding the business and any initiatives that pop up or things that pop up like in the marketplace that the organization starts using. And we step back into our department and say, hey, we probably need to do something there too.
The quantitative risk assessment, that's, I think, the dream for a lot of people. What kind of resources do people need to do that? What does that look like? What kind of effort does it take? If I'm assuming you come in as a CAE, that would be a pretty decent, major initiative for you. It's like, let's build this thing out. What would that look through without giving away the, for the sake of time? We could do a week on, just that topic, but
let's do a simple one. Let's do HR. Let's do HR. And you can look at, the number of joiners, number of leavers, number of transfers, and just in certain departments, that could tell you if you've had a significant number of leavers in payroll and you haven't had the same number of joiners, do they have enough people there to execute their controls appropriately? And that's a very basic, simple example. Like, I mean, we would get into much more complex data and much more complex use cases, but that's just a real simple one. As you can get, you probably already have all that HR data available to you, and it's just looking for trends, maybe by department. We did some great stuff with user access, making sure that people with the same, title, responsibility, reporting manager, geography, that they had the same entitlements. And then you put it on a splatter chart, and you see outliers, and that's where you focus on. So, I mean, it's to me, anything that you could quantify where you can pull out numbers that indicate risk, that's a place that is ripe for quantifiable risk assessment.
Yeah.
And the more of those you can put in place, I think the more effective your audit plan is.
Yeah. I like the HR example. We like to tell folks to look at turnover rate. So a combination of the things that you mentioned, because the turnover rate's high. I mean, that could be a number of things. Maybe it's just poor management and people are going, hey, I don't want to work for this person anymore. I'm getting out of here. It could be a culture thing. There's a number of things that it could be, but especially as people go into audit a given area, to basically have a dashboard of sorts and go, okay, here's turnover rate in this area we're auditing. Here's what AP looks like. Here's what the GL looks like. Here's what P cards spend, whatever. Just have this picture of what the business looks like. And it does when you go into an area, and I think most auditors have gotten this message now, we try to communicate to the auditee, the client, whatever we call them. I'm not the expert on your business and your functions and what you do. You are, so help me understand that and that kind of spiel. But to be able to have a dashboard that can show you what's going on is a really good way to ask, questions. You see the blinking light, you see the outlier, and go, "Hey, what's
100%.
going on over here?" Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I mean, you give the business insight sometimes that they don't have. Yeah, those are things that they might not be monitoring. And there's nothing better. Yeah, this is the ego that I thought I shed, but might still come out. There's nothing better than walking into a meeting and, sandbagging somebody with an issue that they had no idea about.
Yeah.
And that's what you can do with analytics.
Yeah, we put a big emphasis on outlier identification in any given data set, and to be able to go, hey, we see that it's working like this all the time. Did you know that this thing over here in the top right corner, top right hand corner was going on? And they go, nope, didn't know that. What's going on there? That is, to your point, I don't know, for the people that are watching the full video on YouTube, you can probably see my face light up a little bit as we talk through that, or as you said it. All right, so we have a auditor / boxer / preacher, which is definitely a first for the show. I got to think you're one of the only ones in the world with that kind of background. And so as we've hit on, obviously the audit piece of that and your background there and what you're looking to do, what's next for you?
So, I mean, first of all, if anybody has the chance to take 6-7 months off work, do it. I mean, these have been the most, I said to myself, if you mess this up and you have regret at the end of it, I won't forgive you. And I don't have a regret. I've poured myself into my faith. I feel great emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's just given me an opportunity to pour myself into all those things that bring me joy. But it's also given me the realization that, the other thing that brings me joy is working with auditors, working with people, solving problems. So March 18th, 1995, it was a very special day here in Chicago. My idol, Michael Jordan, he issued a 2-word statement to let his colleagues know of a major decision he was making. So today, I'd like to offer that same 2-word statement to any audit organization that's looking for a creative, forward-thinking audit leader. Those 2 words are, I'm back.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.